Hey, I'm Steve Lehto, and today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about buying a used car. I'm an attorney in Michigan, been practicing law for almost 30 years, and I deal almost exclusively with lemon law and people who've bought defective cars and people who've been ripped off in automobile purchases. Spoken to thousands of people about this, so here's everything you need to know before you buy a used car. First of all, we're going to break it into two categories. You can buy a used car from an individual or from a car dealer. And those are two different settings. The laws are usually different with respect to those two settings. You need to keep those two distinctions in mind. So first, we're going to talk about buying a car from a car dealer. Later, we'll talk about buying a car from an individual. So the first thing you need to know is you buy a car from a car dealer. Dealers are very sophisticated. They know the law, and many of the things they do are designed to protect them. They don't do it accidentally. They know what they're doing. So because of that, they sell cars all day long. Most people only buy a car every so often. Now, an automobile is an important purchase, and it's usually the second most expensive purchase the average person ever makes, second only to your house. But even so, most people don't buy cars that often. So the car dealer is selling cars every single day. You buy one every so often. So you need to keep this stuff in mind. First of all of the documents that you're going to be signing when you're buying a car are slanted to protect the car dealer. So right away, go in knowing that. So when you go to buy a car from a car dealer in America, the dealerships are required to have a thing in the car called a buyer's guide. Buyer's guide is mandated by the Federal Trade Commission, and it'll say right on it, buyer's guide, and it must be someplace visible when you look at the car. It's often stuck to the window, could be in the windshield, in one of the side windows. Sometimes they put it on the dashboard, but it's supposed to be available when you look at the car. The buyer's guide says right on it whether or not the car is being sold to you as is or with any warranties. Now, some states don't allow as-is sales, but most states do. So double check, with respect to your state. But the as-is means you're buying a car with all faults. So you buy a car that's as-is in a state that allows that. The car can blow up on the drive home from the dealership. You cannot bring it back and say, hey, I want my money back. The car blew up. No, you bought it as is. As is literally means you're buying it with all faults. So you have to be very, very careful when you're buying a car as is. And you have very few excuses to say you didn't know you were buying a car as is, because the buyer's guide says right on it, are you buying the car as is or with warranties? 99% of all cars sold at car dealerships in states that allow as is sales are sold as is. So there's two boxes they can check. One says as is or one says dealer warranty. You'll almost never see the dealer warranty box checked. So if you're buying it as is, keep that in mind, understand what it means, and protect yourself. Now, below that line of those two boxes where it says as is or dealer warranty, it does say new warranties or manufacturer warranties also. So it's possible you're buying a late model car with a manufacturer's warranty that came with the car when it was brand new. That might be possible. So double check that. But be aware that most vehicles that are a few years old aren't going to have a manufacturer's warranty on them anymore, or they might not. But don't take the dealer's word on that. You're going to want to double check with the manufacturer to find out if the vehicle still has a manufacturer's warranty on it. But again, they must show you that document, buyer's guide, and one of those two boxes at the top must be checked. If boxes below that are checked about a manufacturer's warranty, double check that, because manufacturer's warranties are usually pretty good. Dealer warranties, not so much. We'll talk about that in a second. But before you agree to buy a car, and most people shop for cars based on price, and they're looking for a particular car. They find the car they like with the price they like, and they're inclined to buy it. You're nowhere near wanting to buy that car just yet. You need to have the car inspected, and you need to take it for a test drive. So right away, take it for a test drive, because that's something you're going to be driving the car. You should be able to drive the car yourself and see if it's the kind of car and it behaves the way you want it to, right? So take the car and drive it, and don't just drive it around the parking lot. Don't just drive it around the block. Take it for a good test drive. Get it out on the freeway, drive it at highway speeds, watch to see if it's got any noises or rattles or vibrations, and then check all the things in the car. Does the air conditioning work? Does the stereo work? Do the windshield wipers work? Does the heater work? I've gotten phone calls from people who said they bought a car that was a couple years old and these things didn't work for some weird reason. Who knows why? But the point is that you can figure this stuff out pretty quickly, and if you didn't find that on a test drive, then you're not trying very hard. Make sure you inspect the car in daylight under good conditions. I've had people tell me they bought a car at night, or they bought a car when it was raining and didn't notice the car had problems with the paint, for instance. That's another example. So you don't want to be able to do that. Make sure you've inspected the car under good conditions. And then finally, you should have the car inspected. You should have the car inspected. And by that I mean either with a mechanic or someone who's knowledgeable with cars. I know people who know enough about cars to inspect the car themselves, or they know somebody who could do that. In that case, bring somebody along with you. And by the way, just as a caveat, I would tell you never shop alone. I hate to say this, but if you're a woman, never shop alone. Car dealers are notorious for preying on people who shop alone, in particular women, for whatever reason, and they view that as an opportunity to really lean on somebody and put pressure on them. So if you're going to go car shopping, bring somebody with you, and I don't care. You don't have to bring your best friend. You don't have to bring a mechanic. Bring somebody with you. If nothing else, it gives you another witness, okay? But bring somebody with you. They're less likely to gang up on somebody who's got somebody else with them. Also, if you decide you've got to walk away from the transaction and leave, it's easier to do that if somebody's with you and make sure that they're backing you up on this stuff. So bring somebody with you, especially somebody who can inspect the car, and if possible, have a mechanic look at the car. I've had far too many people tell me they bought a used car, then they took it to their mechanic, and their mechanic said, hey, this thing's got problems. The frame is broken. The gas tank is rusted out. The differential's falling off. I mean, and the mechanic spotted it in 30 seconds. They say, can I do something about it now? I said, no, probably not. You bought it as is. You better if you had that inspection done before you bought the car. So understand what you're looking at when you're looking at the car. You're looking at a used car. If it's being sold to you as is, you need to find out what faults it's got before you buy it. In most states that allow as is sales, if you don't inspect the car and you miss something because you chose not to inspect it, the courts are going to say that you waived your right to complain about things that you could have found had you inspected it. You're at a car dealership, you found a car you're thinking about buying, you've had it inspected, you've test driven it, you like this car. You're going to be signing a bunch of documents, and there's a few things you need to know about before you sign documents and as you sign documents to protect yourself. Extremely important stuff. First of all, I mentioned a buyer's guide. If you didn't see a buyer's guide when you test drove and inspected the vehicle, ask, where's the buyer's guide? I had people tell me that when they asked that, they said, oh, it's right here in the deal folder. And they pull it out. They had it in a file folder, but it was not visible at the time the car was being offered for sale. Technically, that's illegal, but it's better for you just to see the buyer's guide. So ask to see the buyer's guide. But understand they're going to actually whip out a thing called a purchase agreement. Purchase agreement is the contract that you're going to sign to buy the car. Now, the purchase agreement is going to have all the information on it, your name, their name, the VIN of the car, the vehicle identification number, the price of the car, the make, model, and so on of the car, whether it's new or used, and so on. All that information is on a single document, usually. And you're going to be asked to sign that document. They'll sign that document. That becomes the contract for you to buy that car. But that purchase agreement was drafted by the car dealers, and they've been using these documents for years. They've narrowed them down and fine-tuned them to the point where they protect the dealer completely and leave you with almost no protections. So the first thing you need to know is that most purchase agreements used by car dealers in America will have an integration clause in them. And an integration clause is a clause that says, what we've agreed to, you and I, the dealership and the buyer, what we've agreed to is entirely on this document. If it's not on this document, it is not enforceable at all. So that if a salesman says something to you, this is a great car, it runs great, if it ever breaks down, we'll take care of you, we're always here to help you. Those statements are meaningless because they're spoken. By definition, spoken statements by the seller are unenforceable. And quite often it'll even say that. It'll even say verbal agreements by the seller are not enforceable unless reduced to writing on this document. So someplace else on that document is going to be a little thing where it says remarks or other. And so if they actually say something to you that you think is important, ask them if they'll write it on the document in that spot. And this is an interesting trick. If they won't, it means it's not true. So if they tell you this is a one-owner car, now there's ways to figure that out, but if they tell you it's a one-owner car, if that's important to you, say, would you please write that on the purchase agreement, one-owner car. If they won't, there's a problem. Why wouldn't they write that down? And that usually pops up more with things like, tell you what, the transmission is slipping right now, but we'll fix that for you if you buy the car. Number one, you should never buy a car with a problem. You should say instead, no, you fix it, I'll test drive it, then I'll consider buying it. But I've had people tell me, they said they'd fix it. They didn't write it on the document. So if they say anything of importance to you during the negotiations, you want them to write it on the purchase agreement because by the purchase agreement's own language, if it's not written there, it doesn't count. I've told people this, and I don't mean this as an insult to car sellers, but it sounds like one. And that is that if a car seller is moving their mouth and words are coming out, you can ignore anything they say to you because none of it's enforceable according to their own documents. according to their own documents. So if you're sitting at a desk at a cubicle of the seller, and the salesman says anything to you, you can look at the document and go, oh, I don't see that written on the document. Are you sure that's true? And it's not written there, it's not true. So verbal statements of the seller are almost never binding, and the documents will almost always say that. Those statements are not binding. Now, occasionally a seller will say something to you, such as, if you buy this vehicle, we'll put new tires on it for you. Okay? They say that. You say, okay, will you put that in the document? They'll usually either write that in the remarks section or on a we owe document. We owe. 2 words, W-E, we owe, O-W-E. We owe you, like we owe you something, like an IOU. And most dealerships actually have a form that says we owe on it to indicate that happens quite often, where they'll make you a promise and they'll say, we're going to give you something if you buy this car. Now, I would urge you, if it's an auto repair on the car itself, that you ask that it be done and that you can test drive the car after the repair's been done to make sure it's being done correctly. I've had far too many people tell me that they bought a car and while negotiating were told, oh, it does this, we'll fix that for you. Car pulls to one side, we'll fix that for you. And they buy the car and then they bring the car back to service and they fix it, give them the car back, person drives the car home and the car's still pulling to one side. Eventually they take it to a body shop or an alignment shop and they say, well, we can't straighten this, the frame is bent. The frame is bent. So how is that possible? The problem is you can't fix that car possibly. And so their promise to fix the car becomes meaningless because it's an impossible promise. So, nowadays they've got Carfax and other vehicle identification number history check services out there where you can check the VIN and find out what kind of history the car's got. I urge you to use one of them. There's several of them out there. Use any one you like. But be careful because sometimes they miss stuff. And they do occasionally miss stuff. So when you're talking to the person about buying the car, you're negotiating at the dealership about buying a car, and you're inspecting the car and test driving the car, make sure you see the title. If you're in a state where the title is being held by the seller. Because if they've got a copy of the title, ask to see the title before you sign documents. I've had people tell me they signed a whole bunch of documents. The last thing they saw was the title, and the title is the wrong color. So in some states, like in Michigan, the title is green if it's a standard title. But if the car is salvaged or rebuilt salvage, the title is a different color. It's bright orange. And so you have a bright orange title, it's a problem because a rebuilt salvage vehicle is not worth anything near what a regular titled car would be. So you want to make sure the car has got a normal, healthy car title as opposed to a rebuilt salvage title or something of that nature. So the most important thing to remember with the documents is read them all. Make sure that everything on them matches what you've spoken about with the seller, especially when it comes to the price, down payment, payments, things of that nature if you're financing the car. And then also make sure everything matches up with respect to what year the car is and so on. But then finally, any statements they make to you that are important to you, ask them if they'll write those statements down on the purchase agreement. Because if they won't, then you know the statement is not true. At least it's certainly not enforceable. And that would be a problem when you're buying a used car. We're going to talk now about buying a used car from an individual. So dealerships are one thing, individuals the other thing. If you're buying a car from an individual in most states, it's presumed you're buying the car as is. It means you're buying it with all faults. That car is yours. The moment you drive it away, it's yours. Car could blow up. It's now your broken car. So you have to protect yourself going into the transaction. So the first thing you got to do is test drive the car. Make sure you test drive the car under all conditions. Take it out on the freeway, get it up to speed, drive it around the block, test everything in it, make sure the windshield wipers work, the radio works, the air conditioning works, the heat works, check everything. But then have it inspected by a mechanic. And I can't tell you how many times people have called me and said, Steve, bought a car, took it to my mechanic, and you won't believe what he found. Yes, I would. I've heard that story too many times. Mechanics find things in 30 seconds that you didn't find when you inspected the car yourself. Have it inspected by a mechanic. It might cost you a couple bucks, but it's peace of mind you're buying. And if the mechanic tells you to walk away from the car, you dodged a bullet. It's worth the investment. So have the vehicle inspected by a mechanic. It's extremely important because, again, most sales from individuals are presumed to be as is. Then, let's suppose that you strike a deal. You really want to buy this car, okay? And you're looking at the car, you like the car, everything about the car you like, you're still not done yet. Even if you like the price. You got to look at the title. You got to look at the title. There are problems that some people have when they're selling vehicles because they are trying to cut corners. One thing people do in many states is they'll skip titles, meaning they'll buy a car from one person and they'll want to sell it to you, but they won't title it in their own name because they don't want to look like a dealer to the state. Some states make you get licensed as a dealer if you sell as few as 5 cars a year. So what they'll do instead is they'll buy the car from somebody, have that person sign the title, and then they'll say they're going to sell the car to you and just sign it over to you. But the problem is that this person in the middle doesn't appear in the chain of title, and you don't know who they bought the car from. So if you don't know who they bought the car from, there's a problem with the title when you go to the Secretary of State of the DMV. Who do you talk to? This person in the middle you bought the car from? Even though they sold you the car, they have no incentive to help you. Why? They've got your money. And if you try to find the person on the title, who knows? I've spoken to people who bought cars from other states. I've spoken to people who bought cars where the person died. And you're trying to get a title corrected when the person who signed the title is dead. That's a nightmare. And I don't care what price you got on the car. It's not worth the investment you're going to have in legal fees trying to get that one straightened out. So make sure that the title that's being shown to you is in the name of the person who's selling you the car. If it's not, there's a problem. For instance, this person might not own the car. You might not know. Who knows? So you got to have faith in that case. But it's a scary concept because if they're skipping the title, that could be a problem. They could also be curb stoning the car. Some unscrupulous car dealers in some states will actually have a car on their lot that they can't sell for whatever reason. So what they do is they clean the car up and they park it in front of one of the salesman's houses with a for sale sign in the window. And the salesman pretends it's his car. So when you go and look at the car, he goes, yeah, it's my car. And he pretends it's his car. And then when you go to buy the car, he goes, oh, by the way, a friend of mine works at a car dealership. They'll do the paperwork for us. And I've had people who did this not realizing what happened. And then they came into my office and showed me the documents. The document shows the seller was a car dealer, not the guy whose house it was parked in front of. And I said, well, who's this car dealer? And they go, oh, that was a friend of this guy's. No. That was his employer. Okay, that's called curb stoning. And that's one of the things that people are often doing. So when you're looking at a car to buy from an individual, you need to say, do you have a title to this car? And they say, yes. And you say, can I see it? And if they say, oh, you can't see it, I don't have it here, you got a problem. And if they pull it out and it's not in their name, you got a problem. But you also want to see it because even if it is in their name, you got to see what color it is. Because again, some states change the color of the titles to match what type of titles they are. So in Michigan, again, a healthy car's got a green title. Salvage car, different color title. And there's a bunch of different designations depending on the state. But you want to make sure the title's not branded. So on the title, it's a single-page document usually. Across the top, it'll say Certificate of Title for some particular state. And right below that, if it's branded, it could say, Lemon Law Buyback or Rebuilt Salvage or Flood Vehicle. And these are all things that get branded when vehicles have bad things happen to them and pass through an insurance setting, okay? So if a vehicle's been totaled and rebuilt, okay, that car might be roadworthy. It might be legal to drive. But number one, you should get a gigantic discount on it. And number two, you got to make sure the car is safe to drive. Have it inspected by a mechanic. If a mechanic inspects a rebuilt salvage vehicle and says, you know something, it's actually safe to drive. In that case, price it accordingly. Because understand that if you buy a rebuilt salvage vehicle or a vehicle with a branded title, number one, when you go to sell it, you'll get less money for it. But number two, if you're hoping to get a loan on that car, many banks won't lend you money when it comes to a vehicle with a branded title. It's worth less, and the car is the collateral on the loan for the bank. So they're going to be very, very careful about that. So when you're buying a car from an individual, remember, you're buying it as is. Almost always buying it as is. So you have to have the vehicle inspected, take it for a test drive, look at the title, make sure the title looks clean, title matches the person selling you the car, and then if the price is right and everything else lines up, you can buy the car. Okay, so all of those things are things to keep in mind when you're car shopping. But remember that there are always more cars out there, whether you're at a car dealership or some guy's driveway. There are more used cars out there than you could ever possibly need. So if you're looking at one, it's got a problem. It's got a bad title. There's something wrong with it that you don't like. Walk away. You'll find another car someplace else. It's easier to walk away and find another car than it is to deal with the problems with the car right here. But you also have to remember that many of the things that happen when you buy a car, if they happen bad, trying to find an attorney to help you is going to be more expensive than simply if you had avoided the problem in the first place, okay? So as an attorney, I can tell you, I've had too many people call my office that I cannot help Because, yeah, we might be able to sue, we might be able to get you some money, but it's not going to be worth how much it's going to cost you to hire an attorney. It's better to dodge the bullet in the first place if you can. So that's my advice to you on buying used cars here in America. I'm Steve Lehto. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.